Welcome in, everybody. Happy Friday, GC Live. Chris Clark, GamecockCentral.com, joined by my colleague Kevin Miller, standing in for Wes this afternoon. Thanks for joining me, Kev. Hope everybody's having a great day leading in to the weekend. What's up, Josh Campos? He's heading over to the message boards while he waits. Not a bad idea. Go ahead and head over to the Insiders Forum on Gamecock Central. Got a lot to get into. What's up, Garnet Yardbird? Says hello, Chris and Kevin. Hello, Garnet Yardbird. Got a lot to get into today. South Carolina continues rolling through preseason camp, Kev, and another big scrimmage tomorrow afternoon. No media availability, but just like last time, we'll do our very best to pass along as many nuggets as we can. And we're going to get into a lot of that today. Of course, a ton of camp storylines to talk about, Kev. What do we want to see in the scrimmage? Got a couple interesting notes/thoughts, I think, on Lenora Sellers specifically that I want to get your read on, and everybody else. So if you have a question, comment, drop it in the chat. We're 15 days away from Gamecock football. Before we get into that, of course, we're brought to you as always by Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. That's clinthammond.com, 803-422-6797, and the NMLS number is 71597. We tell you about Clint all the time, longtime friend of the show. If you think you may possibly be in the market for a new home, if you have some questions about the mortgage process, questions about lending, even if you just want to talk some Gamecock football while you do that, hit up our guy Clint. He'll be glad to help you out. He's helped Wes out. ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797. And also our friends at Ferry Chevrolet. That's ferrychevrolet.com, 803-937-4531. Just like Clint with mortgages, if you're thinking about a newer used vehicle, go make sure you check out ferrychevrolet.com, F-A-I-R-E-Y Chevrolet.com. Check out their new news inventory, financing options, everything you need online at ferrychevrolet.com. Since 1926, still led by a fourth-generation dealer in Joseph Ferry. All right, Kev, let's dive right into it, man. All Tomorrow is scrimmage 2. And I've talked enough, so I promise I'm going to let you talk here in a second. But just to set the stage, scrimmage 2, man, in the preseason seems like an important one to me. And a lot of coaches have said this in the past, too. They've pointed this out because for some of the same reasons and maybe a little bit different in the past, too. It used to be that scrimmage number 2 was a line where you're going, all right, who's redshirting or not, right? Who is absolutely not ready and they're going to redshirt and they're probably not playing at all. Then when you got the 4-game redshirt rule that we've been operating on up until this year, it was this guy can help us out some. We want to get him experience. You've got some guys where, hey, this guy's a freshman. We're going to play him probably mostly on special teams, but you know what? He's good enough to help us on special teams. I think a good example of that would be Donovan Darden from last year, right? Didn't play in every game, or did play in every game, mostly played on special teams. Yeah. Now we've got this new set of rules to where basically you can pick the old model or the new model, the 5-for-5 model. And so now the coaches, they're having those similar conversations, but now you can go, hey, if all this guy does is play special teams, we don't have to have the conversation about the red shirt. Let's just play him. You've got that in play. And then you've also got, man, some position battles, legitimately. Who's going to be the starter at a particular spot or spots on offense, defense, and special teams? And then also just what is your rotation going to look like at some spots where you feel like maybe you've got your 2 starters, but you're trying to figure out the depth, who you can trust going into a game. So I feel like this is going to be a really big scrimmage, number 2, to kind of build on what was done last week, what's been done in practice so far, and then trying to get some more answers as the season opener gets closer.
Yeah, for sure. We'll have to fire up the SS Brian Shoemaker. That's the Gamecock Central drone. We'll have to fire it up and get as many good aerial views as we can. It's not quite an all 22, but it'll do. And yes, we'll see what we can see, and there are, I think, a lot of storylines to check out. Obviously, we've had some injury news in the last week or so with 2 receivers who are going to miss the entire season. it was a pretty deep room in terms of who was competing for playing time. Does two guys exiting the conversation kind of make the picture a little clearer, or is it even muddier than it was before? Maybe we can get a little bit of notes on that. Could we see, I mean, you mentioned these freshmen. Could we see some guys who that now that the coaches are used to this idea of, oh, we can just play them as soon as we want? Do we see some of these guys step into a role on special teams, or maybe even a spot in the two deep? I mean, we've heard some good things on some of these freshmen, guys like Darius Gray and Sequel Patterson, Noah Clark, Jazavian Currents, Julian Walker. Like, it's not just one or two. There's a pretty long list of freshmen who, at least to me, it wouldn't be surprising if they played in game one and not just, maybe the last drive of the fourth quarter if things go well. So getting a few nuggets of information on that kind of stuff will be really intriguing for us. And hopefully, especially based on what happened last time, hopefully there won't be any bad news that comes out. There's obviously the potential for injury in football. We don't want that to happen. But also thinking about the second scrimmage being the adjustment period from the first, where this is your second action, so to speak, in more of a game-like environment. Do you see maybe the defense start off like how they finished? Do you see the offense start off hot again? Maybe do you see the coordinators getting into the groove of their play calls, things like that? That's what I'm looking for, all of those things.
Yeah, I think that's the question we brought up on the radio show on 107.5 this morning, and Tyler Head, when we were doing a buy or sell segment. It was, and you kind of got to parse this answer, because it's not just, hey, a freshman will score a touchdown in the scrimmage, right? And you try to go back and figure out, did that happen or not, right? Without us being able to see, you kind of go off what you hear. But the question was, does the offense win the scrimmage or the defense? And we heard last week, the offense, I think you could probably say won the scrimmage, just because you heard overall more good things about the offense, and they did get off to such a hot start. They did, from what we heard, have such a great period in kind of the red zone work that they do in the middle of the scrimmage. But then the defense absolutely rebounded and played better. And so you're kind of left to, without like keeping score, right? And without contextualizing, like, all right, the offense scored, but they were playing third stringers, right? You kind of don't know some of those things at times. But it is an interesting question. And then what does that mean, right? I think from scrimmage one, you kind of liked what you heard, because you heard some good things on both sides of the football. I think it's more difficult to figure it out. Well, the offense just dominated. What does that mean? Is the offense, was it just a bad day for the defense? Just a great day for the offense? Was it the scrimmage equivalent of South Carolina hanging 63 on Tennessee in 2022 after being horrible the week before? Is it the defense isn't as good as we think, right? We hear it makes it more difficult to parse that out when something like that happens. But instead, what we heard is kind of a back and forth, a battle. And I think ideally that's what you want to hear coming out of this scrimmage. And you want to come out hearing, hey, here's some individual standouts on the defense, and they made some really big plays in this situation. The offense made some really big plays. I think that gives you a better feel. Of course, another battle, Kev, that I think neither of us mentioned, I don't think, was, what do the kickers look like? Putting it in some pressure situations. Shane Beamer, I thought it was interesting, publicly said during his last press conference, hey, I don't have concerns about the kickers. I think, honestly, Kev, you give me your take. A little bit of maybe public confidence building in that group, so he's not standing up there every week saying, I don't know, this looks bad. Not that it has been bad necessarily, but certainly we've heard it needs to be more consistent, and that nobody stepped up and won that job. There have been some days we've heard that they perform strongly. I just think that there's a consistency there that they're trying to find out who is that guy at kicker.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a talent issue, right? We've seen, or at least, well, not here, but Upton Bellenfant has had success in the past at the collegiate level. Max Kelly was very highly touted out of high school. And, Malik Orson has come in, and he's a big-bodied, strong-legged kicker. And if it were really bad, like to the point that some people are making it out to be online, if it were actually that bad, I think you'd see Mason Love reinserted into the conversation. But Shane Beamer has repeatedly said we're not really entertaining that idea. If it was what was best for the team, we'd do it. So if they were that concerned, I think you'd see his name involved, but he's not. So I think you're right. I think it's right now just trying to find guys who can be consistent, both in the short game, the long kicks, but also in pressure situations. Coaches love to put a lot of pressure on their kickers at practice, whether it's, hey, you guys don't have to run if he makes this 48-yard kick, or they'll just all of a sudden blow a whistle, say 20 seconds, field goal, and they'll have to run out there as if it's the last second of a game. They like to put pressure on their kickers. So they just want to see more consistency. They want to see guys who are ready in every situation. I think that's more the issue rather than we're in deep trouble here on special teams. I don't think that's it.
Yeah, and, it's going to be, frankly, an open question until we see it in a game situation, and
maybe multiple games.
Multiple games, right? Because, frankly, no disrespect intended, but Kent State and Towson, the field, to the extent that any field goals are kicked in that game, the thought / the hope is they're not super meaningful. Of course, you're going to make them. If you're Shane Beamer and Matthew Smiley and the rest of that staff and the team, of course it's meaningful and you have to make it so. But are they going to win the game or lose the game or tie the game for you in the fourth quarter? Probably not. A lot. If that's the case, a lot of things have gone wrong in those games, right? So Mississippi State and Kentucky and Florida and Bama and like some of these earlier games, that's going to be the big test. But you want to go out there and make some early. I'm sure that Shane Beamer and Matthew Smiley are hoping look, we'd love to score a bunch of touchdowns, but man, it'd be pretty sweet if we could get a few field goal attempts in here in those first two games just to kind of see what you've got. Because talk to any special teams coach, whether it's Smiley or Joe D or Pete Limbo that have been here or anybody from anywhere, frankly, and you're going to hear, hey, yes, you're going to chart and track all the kicks in preseason. Which guy's kicking it most consistently in practice? What's the leg strength look like? But when you get in the game, it's a different animal, and when you get those pressure kicks, you really never know how a guy's going to perform. And two of the guys that you just mentioned that are in the mix have not kicked a field goal in a game ever, not just here, but ever. And so that's certainly something to continue to watch. We'll keep an eye on it throughout preseason, and we'll pass along what we hear, right? But at the end of the day, what does it look like when they get out there? I think we were talking about receiver a second ago, Kev, and brought up Sequel Patterson and some others. Garnet Yardbird says it puts Patterson in a position to contribute sooner. And that certainly could be true when you think about the reality that no matter who started between Jaden Sellers and Mazio Bennett in the slot position when they were both in the mix, they're both going to play a lot. Like between those two guys, beyond those two, there's not a lot of snaps to go around at receiver, right? At the slot receiver spot.
Right.
But one of them's out of the mix now. And so that does two things. You mentioned clarity on the slot receiver position. Now you can start to piece this together and say, okay, Nick Harbor at the X spot, Mazio Bennett at the slot. Who's next? And so Sequel Patterson is a natural place to go because A, he's working in the slot, and B, he has a lot of ability. He's one that I'm going to try my best to find out, how does he look in the scrimmage? I think it's interesting that when you think about Sequel, he gets here a year early. He doesn't enroll until the summer. Former class of 27 guy, reclassified, skips a year of school, but can't enroll until the summer. So he doesn't have the winter workout program. He doesn't have spring football. A lot of the buzz that you heard about him was in summer workouts, player run practices. Man, this guy can really pluck the ball. He's a smooth athlete. He's a natural. He can run. He's quick. He's smooth. Those are all great traits. At the same time, and Shane Beamer kind of alluded to this the other day, not really with him specifically, once the full pads come on, which they did last week, the Friday before the scrimmage, now we're executing plays, we're blocking, we're doing all the football things. And so, not saying there is a freshman wall, but could there be, as practice progresses? What do you think on that, just in terms of that transition from, okay, we're doing all the athlete stuff during the summer, all very important things, and then you're moving over to now we're in preseason camp?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest learning curve, so to speak, are at the positions where with more physical play. Obviously it looks a lot different blocking when you don't have any pads on than you do whenever it's time to, be fully decked out and ready to go, um, even potentially going up against ones v ones, things like that. But as it pertains to Patterson in particular, I'm interested to see how he, translates to pads against college athletes, because he is a different type of slot receiver than Mazeo Bennett in terms of their own style. He's more similar to Jaden Sellers,
Yep.
where he's a speed and quickness type guy. Not saying that Mazeo is slow, but he's more of your route running possession receiver in the slot. Whereas Patterson, I've heard somebody call him a jitterbug, right? He just kind of moves around quickly, and there might be certain matchups this year that you're looking at the slot and you're like, you know what, we need that dependable guy who's going to run his route correctly, snag the ball for 8 yards, and go down. And Mazeo Bennett's your man. But you might have some where it's like, we need somebody to be able to catch the ball and make something happen from a yak perspective. And maybe that's Sequel Patterson. So I'll be interested to see how he adjusts, because that could be a big thing for this team. And I think the Z position, the other outside receiver, you could see some of that too, because you've got a bunch of guys who are vying for that spot, but they kind of play the game a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking about DJ Black, who once he gets rolling, he's as fast as any receiver in the room, not named Nick Harbor, probably.
Yep.
Right. And then you've got Donovan Murphy, who can kind of do a little bit of everything. You've got Nitro Tuggle, who's got some explosiveness to his game. Who wins those jobs, so to speak, but also who can do what when needed situationally, I think is going to be interesting to see. And the more scrimmages that they have, the more the coaches will have full looks at these guys in pads doing things for the offense, for the defense, and try to figure out how they're going to utilize them in the game.
Yeah, those three guys you brought up, it just kind of dawned on me that you think back to spring football and you heard stories of from spring football until now. I mean, you've heard stories of all three of those guys taking first team reps, and so that kind of illustrates, you look at the slot position when it was Jaden and Mazeo, same thing for those guys. And that just illustrates how close, these battles are. It's this is a room that's considered to have some depth. It's not depth from the standpoint of, hey, they're bringing back 3 seniors who have all started for, 3 years and all have super high production or all SEC, right? Like that's what you'd love to have. You don't have that yet. Hopefully you get there, but you do have a lot of guys that, like, from an athletic physical tools standpoint, plus just some of the things that they've shown. DJ Black's played a lot of college football. Nitro Tuggle's done some good things at Purdue. Mazeo Bennett had a strong freshman year, right? Like you can see it. It's not just pure potential, but also it's not. We're talking about this room being deep because it's completely proven. That's not the case. And I think if you think about this team hitting some of their goals or hitting all their goals, a lot of these like appearances of depth actually have to come to fruition because you have to stay healthy. And you also have to have some of the things that you've heard in the preseason, like actually translate over to the field, right? That's one reason, man, why I would love, Shane Beamer's talked about this a lot. I would love to have preseason scrimmages against other teams, because coaches would love it, because it's hard to measure your team against your own team Like you I think we're going to be really good on defense or offense or special teams, but how much of that is colored by just like what you're seeing your guys against your guys, and you can't really measure it against another squad, even if you're going and playing I don't know, Furman, Wofford, whoever, even if it's a lower level team.
Yeah, well, you don't know their tendencies, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's if you play against somebody at practice every single day, if you're a defensive back, you're going to know how those receivers run their routes. You're not necessarily going to know that against an opponent. Hopefully, through film study and things like that, you'll have an idea, but you don't have the opportunities to unintentionally cheat, so to speak, and you can actually get a better read on things. And plus, like sometimes when you're going just against your own team, your coaches are going to call the same play 4 times in a row because they want to get it right. And when that happens, it's not exactly the same kind of look you're going to get in a game because you just did it 4 times in a row. Whereas against another team, it won't look quite like that. So yeah, I think that would be a really good thing if it could ever come to fruition. I kind of have my doubts. I think that especially now in the era of the transfer portal, there's probably smaller school coaches that are like, well, I don't want to take my guys there. They might want to stay. Like
Yeah.
you don't necessarily want that to happen that way, but I do think there's a lot of potential benefit if something like that could happen.
Yeah, I think, man, we were talking to a coach, a high school coach this summer at one of the 7-on-7 camps and talking about that very subject, and some lower level schools have just resigned themselves to the fact that if we get guys, they're going to get recruited. Like it's almost a recruiting pitch for them. Hey, you're not getting the looks you want out of high school. Come here, do your thing for a year or whatever. And then once somebody comes and plucks you out of the portal, we're going to shake your hand and wish you the best. Move on to the next one, right? So, all right, we got a couple interesting questions. So we'll take these kind of all in one when we're talking about position battles. But Robert Short brings up, what's your feelings on the running back room? Asks about 2 back sets. And then Austin Gardner talks about Quay Dodd and the edge room. So, Kev, I want to get into some of these position battles that I'm particularly interested in running back, I think, when it comes to what's going to happen at the scrimmage. But real quick, let's tell everybody about one of our other partners. Here's what traders on the Poly Market app think of South Carolina's 2026 regular season win total, 88% at 5.5+ wins. If I were to take a $40 position on South Carolina 2026 regular season at 6.5+ wins, here would be my payout. Gamecock Central and On3 have partnered with Poly Market. Poly Market gives you a $20 bonus for a $10 deposit upon sign up when you download the Poly Market app with our link with the custom code ON3. That's ON and the number 3. To download the Poly Market app, use the link in the show description, and that unlocks your $20 bonus so you can start taking positions on the Poly Market app. Also, check out the Poly Market app live chat feature. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Not available in all jurisdictions. Trading is risky. 100% loss can occur. See polymarket.com/TOS for more information. The Polymarket US app serves as an independent software provider, an affiliate of Polymarket US and Polymarket Clearing, the CFTC regulated exchange and clearing organization. All right, Kev. So running backs, fascinating position. Okay, because like take it back to how we got here. South Carolina brings back the backs that they could and wanted to bring back from last year's roster, who have all done some things in college, whether it's at South Carolina when you think about Jawarn Howell, when you think about Fuller, when you think about Isaiah Augustave at other schools, like hasn't really done as much here.
Right.
And those guys, you feel like all have some meat on the bone where they could continue to progress. And I think in some instances have. And then you bring in Christian Clark from the transfer portal, last seen rushing for 100 yards against Michigan for Texas in their bowl game. And he was one of the ones specifically named to us in scrimmage number 1 as having a really good day. Stan Drayton, new running backs coach for South Carolina, the veteran, has had some great ones in his time in the NFL and in college, said, Christian's completely revamped his body, and the way he looks, and he's gotten more explosive. Obviously, Fuller's carried a lot of buzz, really the entire year. But this is one of the positions, and I think Shane Beamer was alluding, at least in part, to this position the other day when he mentioned telling the team during their team meeting, we need some guys who's going to win these jobs. And so, like, is Fuller the guy that you're saying that's probably the guy? Yeah. I mean, as of now, and certainly for this year, but Clark's continued to come on. There was a Jabri Coleman, mentioned the other day. Drayton's very familiar with him. So you have talent in this room to where maybe it ends up sorting out maybe, okay, well, who's the next guy or couple guys? And at the top, it's like Fuller and Clark. But this scrimmage, man, could it change things at the top or, in the next guys up kind of category?
Yeah, running back's going to be pretty fascinating to watch, I think. I mean, you've got guys who have different styles as running backs too. So it's not even just about raw production. It's also like, what does the offense want or need at a particular time? We know Matt Fuller is kind of your go fast and hard type of running back. Like, he's going to hit the hole hard. He's going to be running pretty fast if he gets an open field. You don't really want to get in his way because he might run you over. Then you've got some other guys who are more patient runners. It's not that they're not big and strong too. They are, but they use that strength in a different way. Jawarn Howell is a guy that, I mean, he has really good balance, right? And we've seen and heard good things in that regard for Christian Clark as well. And I am very interested with Clark because, like you said, Stan Drayton told us he's reshaped his body, but I believe his weight gain was only 5 pounds. So what that tells me is he probably lost 5 pounds of bad weight and added 10 pounds of good weight. And that's pretty drastic when you think of it in regards to adding 10 pounds of muscle. So I'm wondering, like, could he be a step faster than what we saw in the bowl game against Michigan? Could he potentially be a little bit stronger at the point of contact when he meets a linebacker in the hole? And then we don't talk about this kind of stuff too much, but like, who's going to hold up best in pass protection? Yep. We know how important that is. And I watched it, and I know you watched it, the running back sled blocking drill the other day. There were some guys who, we'll just say, Coach Drayton was having to get onto a little bit because they weren't necessarily doing as good of a job as he wanted them to. And there were other guys who are like, yep, that's exactly what he's looking for. Yep. That could play a role in playing time as well. And when you've got so many veteran guys, because at this point there are 4 scholarship guys who are in their 3rd year or 4th year in college, when you've got that makes it a little bit simpler, I think, to say, all right, this guy doesn't have it today, let me go grab somebody else. I don't think you're going to see situations like what we saw at South Carolina at times in the past where the running game's not working and you just continue running the same guy with the same couple of play calls because you don't have anything else. I don't think it's going to look like that. I do think it's Fuller and Clark at the top right now, but that could very easily change. And the next couple of weeks are going to determine a lot of that.
Yes, absolutely. Like, what we think one thing, but you also know you've got, like, everybody in that room is kind of on each other's heels, like sometimes you go into a season and maybe you say, like, I don't really like sometimes you go in and say, this guy's the starter. There's no doubt. Who's second? Who's playing for second? Sometimes you go and say, I don't really know who the starter is, but it's definitely between these two guys. There's not much that we can say, like, absolutely definitively right now. I think we can say, and I agree with you, just based on what we've heard, Fuller and Clark, those are probably your top 2. But, man, I don't know if he can be super definitive even about that part because there's another scrimmage, right? Because all these guys are experienced. So one other, like, a small thing that could be significant is, what kind of lift does this room get from Stan Drayton and Kendall Browse in that offense? Players aren't static. They can always get better. And sometimes just when I say change of scenery, I don't literally mean transferring in this context. I mean, just getting a different environment, being a scheme or a coach or how something's operated. These guys have all of the above. They've got a rebuild O-line, a new O-line coach, they have a new position coach, Stan Drayton, very no-nonsense type of guy, and they have a new scheme with Kendall Briles that allows them to play faster, and we've heard specifically with Matt Fuller that has really helped him. A lot of it's Matt Fuller, credit him, but also it seems like this scheme has been a good match for his skill set. Edge room, Kev, was mentioned earlier in one of the questions. Not going to spend a lot of time on Dylan Stewart. Nothing new there other than what's already been said. Caleb Herring, I think, continues to have a really good camp. Julian Walker, we know, at least had a sack in the last scrimmage. So, I'll be curious to see what do we hear from some of the guys in the other category in the edge room. Julian, Quay Dodd, Anthony Addison, any of those guys. And what does that look like coming out of the scrimmage?
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of things on Anthony Addison. He's a guy who they really like his motor. And we saw last year at South Carolina a guy who, kind of waited his turn, always had a high motor in Brian Thomas Jr., and he wound up on the All-SEC team. I'm not saying that that's going to happen this year for Anthony Addison. What I am saying is that his style of play may be a little bit shorter than some of these other edges. Like, he's certainly not 6'6", 255 like Julian Walker. That's not Anthony Addison, but he plays really hard. He can get up under blockers' pads for leverage to help make up for the fact that he's not quite as long, right? That type of guy, especially with a position coach in Deion Barnes who values effort and doing things the right way, I'll be interested to see if he pushes for a bigger role than maybe a lot of people are expecting. So we've heard a lot of good things. And, Quay Dodd was mentioned in the question, and he's a guy with a ton of talent. He was a little bit raw coming in. He came up as a basketball player, and he looks like it, right? He's 6'5", 6'6", now up to about 250 pounds, and that's a little new for him. Can he play with that weight? We will see. He's definitely an athlete. He's definitely long. If he gets out there, you feel good about him being able to match up athletically. Like, you don't feel like that's where he's going to fall short. So there are a lot of names who could get involved. And that's not even considering guys like, Drew Collins, who transferred in this offseason. It's not considering some of these other guys that I think, especially at the beginning of the season when Stewart, he may or may not play as much. Like, how many of these guys might get some reps and really give themselves a leg up over everybody who's maybe not named Stewart, Herring, and Walker.
Yeah, George Wilson, as a
George Wilson, absolutely. Yeah.
Obi Sechi-Pra, the staff really likes.
He's kind of a freak athletically, man.
Freak athletically. Just was injured last year, and really, I was told, I actually heard this offseason, like in camp, like, hey, last year before he got hurt, like, he was doing some impressive things. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's, look, practice, preseason camp, the scrimmages for these guys. And honestly, man, we've said this a lot, but the first two games, like, having the ability, I think, to run out there and instead of playing Miami, you're playing Kent State, then you're playing Towson. And you kind of course, no coach is going to say this ever, but you do have a ramp up period where you can get a look at some of these guys, and so some of the backups, some of the young players, that we've been talking about. You mentioned a few of them to start the show, your Darius Grays and Jazavian Currences of the world, where Noah Clark, like, all right, we think this guy is this. How does he respond when we put him out there? And you don't have to do that week one against Miami. You can do it weeks 1 and 2 in games that, you're overwhelmingly, thought that you are going to win those games. Before we move on to the next topic, Kev, let's tell everybody about our friends over at Rytech Electric, proud sponsor of Gamecock Central, founded by our guy Steven back in 2007. They serve Columbia, Lexington, and all around the Midlands, and have done so very well ever since. 4.9 stars from over 400 Google reviews, all residential and commercial electrical work. That is what they specialize in. And every electrician on their team is a direct Rytech employee. So they don't use subcontractors. When they come out to your home or business and tell you the price before they touch a single wire, They're not going to then send some crew that you have no clue who they work for, where they came from, any of that. Direct Rytech employees only. Every repair backed with a 1-year parts and labor guarantee. So any electrical issues or installation needs that you have, flickering lights, dead outlets, tripping breakers, panel upgrades, whatever it is, give them a call. 803-303-8274. A real person picks up. That's Rytech Electric. Appreciate them being part of the show. All right, Kev, so I want to bring up some Lenora Sellers talk. Not about class, not about internships. Some good stuff. All right. And a couple different things that I saw going around social media today. And I'm going to attempt to, on the fly, see if I can put these up on the screen. So y'all bear with me real quick. I don't know if I'm going to be able to actually put them up. Probably not. I don't want to sit here and spend a bunch of time doing that. So I'm just going to tell you. All right. Jordan Reed, who's an NFL draft and college football analyst from ESPN, put up a clip of Lenora Sellers taking a few snaps, throwing a few warm-up balls before the Virginia Tech game in Atlanta last year, Kev. Excuse me. And he calls him one of the biggest wild cards of the 2027 quarterback class, meaning in the NFL. A-level arm power, mobility, deep accuracy. Poor surroundings led to bad habits and playing too robotic. Wants to see how he plays under new OC Kendall Browse. So I've got something else that goes with that, Kev, that I want to bring up. But your thoughts on what Jordan said there. Poor surroundings, like elite. Basically, the point is elite physical tools, but poor surroundings, which kind of gave him these bad habits and playing too robotic. Thoughts on that?
I think depending on the intention behind those words, there's some legitimacy to them. There were some things that happened last year, and I don't even mean necessarily on the field, but things that were taught, or maybe a better word to use is emphasized to Lenora Sellers, that kind of threw him off from his natural play style. And it's not a secret. Offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach Mike Shula from last season made it pretty clear to Lenora Sellers, like, hey, you can run, but you need to look to pass this read, and this read. And it kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, it just changed the way Lenora Sellers played, which came across as potentially robotic, as Reed said. But I think more than that, it caused him to not play with as much confidence as he typically played with. And he's spoken on that this offseason, and he has said that he's gaining his confidence back because he's more comfortable. Anytime somebody's playing a different way than the way that they've had success before, they're not going to feel comfortable. And that was one of the big things for Lenore's last season. He just simply wasn't comfortable. And some of that was from coaching, but some of that was because the offensive line didn't perform the way it needed to. And we've talked that to death all offseason. It's legitimate. It should be better this year. How much better, we will see, but it should be better. If it is better to the point that he doesn't have to worry about losing this confidence and this comfort that he's built up all offseason, we could see something really special this year, because we know what Lenora Sellers can do from a talent standpoint. There is nobody in college football, and I stand by this, there's nobody in college football who has the talent that Lenora Sellers has when you combine his ability to throw the ball 65 yards down the field on a dime to the fastest receiver in the world, Nick Harbor, right? But also his ability to take off running and run through or around defenses. Nobody else can do it quite like he can. So if he's able to stay confident, stay comfortable in what should be a better situation playing under Kendall Briles, both from a play calling and just general mindset, right, and the blocking can be a little bit better, I think it's going to be really, really improved.
Yeah, I think the difference in 24 and 25 was, well, there's a lot of them. So one difference, when you look at 24, a lot of Lenore's best plays, like some iconic plays, happened when things broke down. Obviously 3rd and 16. You think about the Missouri game where he just shrugged off a monster pass rusher and just squatted the guy off of him basically, and then goes and makes a play, and many others. A lot of those same scenarios presented themselves last year, but the results weren't as good. And so you go, well, why? And I think it's all those things that you just brought up, and then Jordan Reed brought up too, maybe overthinking, certainly not playing with as much confidence. I think that was pretty evident. Whether it's, confidence maybe in himself, confidence in the team. I don't want to speak for him, but like it was evident he was not as confident as a player in 2025, particularly as the season progressed, as he was at the end of 2024. The robotic comment, like, you can kind of see that when you go back and look. A lot of times you're going, hey, 2024 Lenoris would have done this or that in that instance, and then it doesn't happen, And so here's the other thing I want to bring up. So David Hale of ESPN put this up. This might be kind of hard to see for y'all. So he's talking with Cade Bell, the OC at Pitt, about taking fewer sacks. And so he looked at pressure rates. And this is a very interesting way of putting it. Most elusive and least elusive quarterbacks in terms of returning power 4. Now, when you see least elusive quarterback and you see Lenoris Sellers on it, you're going, well, that's idiotic. He's probably one of the most elusive quarterbacks in the country. But I think what this is measuring, Kev, just, kind of titled in a different way, is just, taking sacks. And a lot of people get really mad if you say, hey, if you're struggling from a pass protection standpoint, it does start with the O-line, but it's also what's happening at tight end, running back, and it's quarterback play. That is not, let me just be clear, that's not any of us saying, well, actually the offensive line wasn't that bad. No, it was, the offensive line was a mess last year for the most part. Now, does that absolve any of those other things or like take them out of the equation? No. Like there were a lot of instances where I'll go back to what I said earlier. You look at some of the things that happened and you go, all right, Lenoris has to get rid of the ball there. Or in the past, he breaks that tackle, or in the past, he moves around and gets himself out of trouble. Things that didn't happen as much last year. So again, some of his best plays are when things break down because he is so elusive, but you got to clean up those instances, right? Where get rid of the ball, take off, like something, right? You got to get back to the 2024 level with that.
Right. Well, and we saw, the Ole Miss game last year, you were there in person. There were 2 different instances in which it wasn't that the protection was good, but it was good enough that it would seem like 2024 Lenoris Sellers would have either gotten the ball out or escaped, where he just kind of floated into the sack. And that brings down those numbers, the numbers that David Hale pulled up there, that brings that down. And that's because if you are not playing with confidence, you're slower to get rid of the football. You are slower to make decisive decisions as a runner, right? And that kind of stuff in a game where you're talking about average throwing times being 3 seconds or less, like every half second is a big deal. So I think that's where a lot of that comes from. It's not that he can't avoid sacks from a physical perspective, because we know obviously he can. And even early in the year he did against Virginia Tech. He had the same idea where he just like squatted a 300-pound man off of his back and ran around the edge for a first down. Like we've seen him do it plenty of times, but he's got to do it here too. And he's fully capable of that. And according to what he says, he's much more confident now. So I think we'll see a whole lot more of that in 2026 than we did in 2025.
And I think we've heard that too, like not just from Lenoris, not that we wouldn't believe him, right? But more than just him saying, yeah, I'm more confident in the press conference. Like heard that from a lot of people around the program who've been watching him, seen him in practice, that he's got that back. And that's your baseline, right? You got to get that back. Like you got to get that confidence level back. And then can you sustain it into the season? So now you start thinking about, hey, first couple games, come out there and have a lot of offensive success heading into SEC play, how much of a lift that's going to give to him and the rest of this team to keep that that confidence level high.
And I think the receiver position will help too, man. We didn't talk much about this, but other than Nick Harbor, everybody kind of bounced in and out of the rotation at receiver last year. I know Vandrevius Jacobs had decent numbers by the end of the year, but he was still up and down with snap counts.
Yes.
This year, there's going to be a deep rotation, but it's not because that guy's not performing. We got to get him out and get somebody else in. It's going to be because, no, that guy behind him is pushing and playing well. And I think that changes things too, because not only do you not have confidence in himself or the offensive system or the offensive line, I think there were probably times where he didn't have a whole lot of confidence in his receivers. And I think this year that's going to change. So that's just another positive in the corner of Lenore Sellers.
Yeah. What can you do around him to help him, and certainly you hope like personnel is one of those. You hope that the scheme is another part of it. They all have to work together. All right, more preseason talk. And then also, Kev, I should have mentioned right off the top of the show, published author Kevin Miller. We're going to talk about your book as well here shortly, but real quick, tell you about one of our other partners here. Hey, is there a money lesson that y'all wish you had learned earlier when you were a kid? And if you've got kids now, how are you trying to pass that down to your kids? For all the parents out there with teenagers, for instance, we know you're already trying to keep a million different things under control. Cash App is here to help make sure your teen's money and their spending isn't adding to that craziness. With the Cash App card available to teens 13 to 17 with sponsorship by an eligible parent or guardian, every transaction triggers a real-time notification for you to see. It empowers your teen to practice independence while giving you peace of mind by keeping track of their spending. You can manage everything directly from your own Cash App account with having to switch between the two, making it simple to stay connected to your teen's financial activity in a way that's both efficient and empowering. Finally, nobody wants unnecessary surprises. And with Cash App, there are no monthly fees, no minimum balance requirements, no hidden charges when sending or receiving money. With the Cash App card, you and your teen's balances receive 24/7 fraud monitoring. And if the card ever gets lost, you have the ability to lock their card right from your phone in just one tap. Parents, it's time to start focusing on your teen's financial learning and growth instead of stressing about the fine print. If you're ready to give your teen more independence while staying in the loop, start by downloading Cash App and sponsoring their account today. New Cash App customers can earn $10 if they use the code FAMILY10 in their profile at sign up and send $5 to a friend within 14 days. Terms apply. Download Cash App today and sponsor your teen. Visit our link in the bio. Cash App's a financial services platform, not a bank. Banking services provided by Cash App's bank partners. Prepaid debit cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC. Cash App Visa Debit Flex cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC, and the Bancorp Bank N.A. pursuant to a license from Visa USA Inc. See terms and conditions. For the Sutton prepaid cards, Sutton Debit Flex card, and Bancorp Debit Flex card, savings provided by Cash App, a Block Incorporated brand. Visit cash.app/legal/podcast for full disclosures. Kev, let's talk about your book, and then I want to finish this thing out with a little bit more preseason talk, like biggest things. Start thinking about it, and y'all drop it in the chat, the comments. What's the biggest thing that you want to learn, the biggest question that you want to have answered, whether it's like something that Shane Beamer says after the scrimmage, something that we learned that we report back on Gamecock Central. Like, what's the biggest question that you have? But Kev, let's talk about your book. So you and Brent Sylvia, in conjunction with the head ball coach, Steve Spurrier, have put out your book, The Spurrier Effect, How One Coach Transformed Gamecock Football. I have started reading it. It is fantastic so far. I'm a few chapters in, and I'm trying to get through more of it. I will probably work on that tonight a little bit. But congrats on the book, man. How's it? How's this process been?
A little crazy, and honestly, maybe it's not crazy, and I just don't really know what it's supposed to be like. But it's been a cool ride. There have been a lot of well wishes and a lot of people supporting us, and we're very grateful for that. Thankful for everyone who was ordered or even thought about ordering the book. Some people have already told me they finished it, and
Whoa.
yeah. Some people even finished it before I got my copies, which is kind of wild. I'm like, how'd you get it before?
You're
How'd
like,
you get
wait.
it before me? But no, it's been really cool, man. The book kind of has like an introductory period in the first few chapters, and then it gets into every season. In fact, every game of the Steve Spurrier era.
Yeah.
And you kind of at the beginning and end of each chapter, there's some transitions into those seasons. You get to see some of the behind the scenes that were going on in those years, which I think is pretty cool for those who followed along closely. You can see, the way Steve Spurrier wanted his coaching staff to run, wanted his players to think about themselves and think about football, that kind of stuff. And it was just a really fun process getting to learn all that.
Yeah, again, I'm not all the way through it, unfortunately, but man, there's so much like right off the bat, like you hear from Steve Spurrier directly in the book. You get the foreword by Connor Shaw. You've got the chapter on Jerry Spurrier, but man, there's a lot of ball in the book too, right? Like talking about decisions that he made in games. This is why we did this. Play calls, like reliving some of the biggest moments. The rivalry wins, like the first win over Tennessee, the first win over Florida. And then I haven't gotten to these parts yet, but like hearing about developing Jadeveon Clowney and Alshon Jeffrey and Stephon Gilmore, like just so much stuff packed in there. So I'm ready to see what's next, man, because, there's already been a lot of instances where I'm like, oh yeah, like you haven't forgotten it, but you kind of have to bring it back up to the surface of your mind. You're like, oh yeah, that's awesome. And then there's always backstories to it.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things about the head ball coach being, so involved with this entire process is that we get to both provide some new information, because there is some stuff that he didn't necessarily tell the public back then, but you also get to relive the memories that you experienced during that time. So for everybody who was around for the Spurrier era, you got to see it firsthand, and getting to go through it in the book again is not quite like reliving it, but in a way it is. And, there hasn't been the same level of sustained success here since then. So there's something special about getting a chance to go back down memory lane a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I just love how, like, when he came in, it's like, no, we're going to win, and like, stop saying that we can't,
Right.
and like, here's some immediate evidence for you, and then of course, as the book progresses, more and more first and good things continue happening, and not only getting to relive those, but like hearing the perspective of him and others, is really, really cool. So make sure you check that out. If you don't have a copy yet, it is available now in hardcover, which I have, and the ebook, if that's your thing. You can go to uscpress.com. That's where you can go get it. Hardcover or ebook. Go get the Spurrier Effect, How One Coach Transformed Gamecock Football. I know Kevin and Brent Sylvia worked extremely hard on it, and it's awesome. So go check it out. All right, Kev, I gave you some homework that you did not have a lot of time to complete. So biggest thing that you want to learn coming out of the scrimmage. And I think like we gave a bunch of things. I asked that in some form or fashion to start the show. Like, what can we learn? What are the storylines? But can you boil it down to one thing?
Yeah, I think before I even do that, I do want to point out some things that I'm no longer looking for.
Oh, let's hear it.
I am no longer looking to see a winner in the nickel battle, because I think there is not a winner. I think they're both going to play, and they're both going to play a lot. And that might sound like a cop-out, but I think that's actually what's going to happen. And I think both Corshid Scott and Gerald Kilgore will play together pretty much every snap at nickel, but they may also play some other spots in the secondary at times. You could see a lot of rotation. Torian Gray is a big fan of that. So I think you're going to see that. So I'm done looking at the nickels. I know there's two good football players there, and I'm pretty confident they're both going to play a lot.
That is Wes Mitchell's exact thought too. He's there. Y'all are on the same page.
Well, I always knew that Wes was pretty smart, so that worked out.
That's right.
No, I think I am mainly looking to actually answer your question now. I think I'm mainly looking to see, or at least hear about, there continuing to be a growing sense of comfort and confidence. And I know that sounds very similar to what we said about Lenora Sellers, but if you're thinking about the offense, the most important player to have comfortable and confident is your quarterback. And you've got a lot of guys in that on that offensive line who have played a lot of football. And if they've got an experienced, confident quarterback behind them, there's a good chance that they up their game a bit. If they play with confidence, that's going to help the running game because running backs, they can't run if they don't have blocking. It's going to help the receivers because the pass pro is going to be better. So I think confidence and being comfortable with Kendall Briles' system now that they've been in it for 8 months, so to speak, since January, I think that's going to be the thing I'm looking forward to hearing the most about because I think the defense is going to be what it's going to be at this point. As long as South Carolina has comparable athletes, and I think they do, I think South Carolina is going to take the football away. I think they're going to limit their opponents. They're not always going to shut them down, but I think they're going to limit their opponents, and they're going to do their best to generate some pressure either with the front four or from the second level. So I think I know what I'm going to get out of that defense, but I want to see and hear about the confidence level of the offense.
Yeah, I really wanted to try. So my answer is going to be like a little bit of a cop out, non-answer, but I tried to dive into like, okay, it's got to be one specific topic. I was thinking to myself, I want to see is somebody going to take that running back job and absolutely make it theirs, and maybe that's Matt Fuller, right? I don't think the odds of us hearing, hey, making this up, Jabri Coleman had a really good scrimmage. Right? He's number one right now. Like, I don't expect that we'll hear that. But does Matt Fuller and or Christian Clark just kind of raise their play to where they look like 1A and 1B or 1 and 2 or whatever it may be? But then I started thinking, well, man, there's some other positions too where that might apply. Now, not as many as there were, right? But one of the receiver spots, that's one. Mike Furry's going to rotate guys, but he told me at media day before preseason camp started, like, you want to have your guys that you can go roll with. So, like, somebody's going to be the starter, and that starter is, maybe not going to be 80-20 on the snaps versus their backup, but they're going to play more, probably. We'll see how it shakes out. So running back, one of the receiver spots, the center battle. If Darius Gray has another good scrimmage wherever he's working, do they start thinking, all right, we got to get our best 5 on the field? What is that? So I would just go a little bit more generally toward, do we get more clarity on some of these position battles? And to your point, you and Wes, with your nickel corollary, is it, hey, you know what? Both those guys still look good. They're both going to play. Or do we hear, like, does your theory get disproved? I know you said it's locked in, but I just have to got to leave that possibility. So I'm not fully there with y'all two yet, but I can see it. Like, I think I'm leaning that way, right? So I would just say in general, positional clarity on some of these battles. That's the biggest thing. So we'll be digging on it. I know you will, Kev. I'll be digging on it. Wes will be digging on it. JC, JB, the guys from the Big Spur and Inside the Gamecocks crew, they'll be digging on it too. So if you're not a member, we still have fall camp sale, 75% off your first year for new members only. What that gets you is a year of access to GamecockCentral.com, the Big Spur, the Insiders Forum, every single piece of content that we publish throughout the year, plus a huge community of Gamecock fans, not just this weekend, not just throughout preseason camp. You get all the way through the season, the transfer portal, because if you join today, you're going to get all the way through next August. And at that point, maybe you'll be hooked. I don't know. Hopefully you'll like us. But you get to try us for $30, $249 a month, 75% off your first year on a new annual subscription. So check it out. Kev, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I'll just add that there are a lot of theoretical things that guys on this team can do. I'll be
Yeah.
interested to see after this scrimmage and the upcoming scrimmages how many of those theoretical things become reality. There are a lot of guys who, people talk about even in the questions, like a guy like Maurice Brown being big enough, strong enough, fast enough to do some things on offense. Theoretically, absolutely. Does it happen? We will see. I want to see, hey, what happens at safety? Does David Busey take it, claim it, or does the talented freshman Jazavian Currents show what he's made of already? Like those types of things, the theoreticals, I'm hoping they become more set in stone realities so that we can have a better idea of what to project when we're going into the season.
Well, it'll be exciting, man. I'm looking forward to seeing what we hear. Can't see, remember, but what we hear coming out of the second preseason scrimmage, which is tomorrow afternoon. Of course, we're recording this on Friday. If you're not listening live, listen to the podcast version. Kev, appreciate you taking time to join me, man.
No, thanks for having me.
All right. Appreciate everybody listening, as always, here on GC Live. And make sure you check us out on GamecockCentral.com. We will be back next week with another show, and then stay tuned throughout the weekend for complete coverage of Gamecock football and recruiting as we roll throughout the preseason. Y'all have a great Friday. Y'all have a great weekend. See you next time.